When I turned 72, this became my reality. A life hollowed out by silence and regret. I'm Thomas Reed, a retired carpenter from a dusty Montana town. And for 5 years I've wandered through grief, seeking purpose, but finding none. Nothing brings me joy anymore, not the wood shop, not the sunrise. I share this because the pain is real, the grief a shadow that never lifts. It's been 5 years since the fire took my daughter Clara and her boys, and I want you to feel it too. Subscribe now. Leave your own story below. I need that connection. Let me take you back to where it all shattered. It was a frigid December night 5 years ago when the phone rang. Clara's husband, Mark, his voice choked. Our cabin, my pride, had caught fire from a faulty heater I'd promised to fix. Clara, little Jacob, and Timmy, gone in the blaze. I fell to my knees, cursing myself, praying to a God I wasn't sure listened. Mark blamed me, his words cutting deep. "You swore you'd keep them safe." I retreated, my hands idle, my faith a flicker. Nights blurred into whiskey and guilt, until one dawn, a dream hit me. Clara's voice, soft as snow. "Forgive yourself, Dad. Live." I woke, tears wet, and that evening, alone in my shop, I carved a small cross, my hands trembling. The next day, a letter slid under my door. Mark's handwriting, shaky but there. "Tom, can we talk?" Was this God's first strike, cracking my shame? I didn't know, but my heart stirred. That letter from Mark was a lifeline I didn't deserve, though I couldn't see it then. It arrived on a gray January morning, the paper creased like his heart. "Tom, I've been angry, but I miss you. The boy's memory deserves us together," he wrote. I read it by the wood stove, my hands shaking, not from cold, but from the weight of his grace. That night, I carved again, the cross growing under my touch, and a strange warmth filled me, like God whispering, "Start here." The next day, a storm rolled in, rare for Montana, rattling my windows. As I secured the shop, a beam cracked loose, nearly striking me, but I dodged it, feeling a divine hand steer me clear. Was this God's way of waking me? Mark came that weekend, his face gaunt but kind. We sat by the fire, the silence thick with unsaid words. I confessed, "I failed them, Mark. I swore I'd fix that heater." He nodded, tears falling. "I blamed you, but I see now it was an accident. We both lost." That vulnerability cracked something open, and I shared the dream, Clara's voice urging forgiveness. He listened, then said, "Maybe she's right." The storm outside intensified, a tree branch crashing against the roof, startling us into laughter, a rare sound. "Sounds like she's knocking," Mark joked, and I felt God's presence, using nature to mend us. The following week, my arthritis flared, a familiar ache from years of hammering nails. But as I massaged my hands, that warmth returned, easing the pain. I took it as a sign, God blessing my small steps towards self-forgiveness. I started journaling, the lamplight casting shadows on my words, each entry a prayer of release. Then a call from Pastor Ellen asking me to lead a grief group felt like divine timing. "Your story could help, Tom," she said. I hesitated, but the signs, dream, storm, healing, pushed me forward. Was God forging a new path through my broken vow?
Mark's words lingered like smoke from the fire, stirring memories I'd buried deep. The storm that night had left my roof leaking, a steady drip echoing my tears. I fixed it the next morning, hammer in hand, when a sudden gust knocked me back, but I caught myself, feeling God's steady grip. Keep going, it seemed to say. The grief group started that evening, a small circle in the church basement, faces etched with loss. I spoke of Clara and the boys, my vow broken, the guilt that choked me. I've tried to move forward, I said, but the pain's real, it doesn't fade. A young widow, Grace, shared her husband's accident, her voice breaking. I blame myself, she confessed. As we prayed, a thunderclap shook the windows, lights flickering, the storm returning, forcing us closer. God's way of binding our wounds? The group met weekly, my shop becoming a haven for talks. Grace visited often, her eyes mirroring my sorrow. One afternoon, as we carved a memorial plaque for the boys, a call came from Mark, his voice urgent. "Tom, I found Clara's Bible, notes in the margins about forgiveness. She knew you'd blame yourself." I wept, the words a divine balm. That night, the wind howled again, a branch crashing near the shop, but sparing it. I saw it as God's strike on my self-hate, urging release. By spring, my arthritis eased, doctors calling it inexplicable, but I knew God healing as I forgave myself. The group grew, stories flowing like rivers, and Mark joined, his presence a miracle. "We're family," he said, hugging me. The revolution began quietly, grief turning to grace through divine signs.
Mark's presence in the group shifted everything, like a door creaking open after years locked shut. We met weekly, his stories of Clara blending with mine, the boys' laughter echoing in our words. One evening, as I carved a toy for Grace's son, a fierce wind whipped through the town, uprooting trees and cutting power. In the dark, we huddled by candles, sharing vulnerabilities, Mark admitting his guilt for not checking the heater himself. "We both failed," he said, and I felt God's breath in that wind, blowing away blame. The storm passed, leaving the church intact, but the streets a mess, and in cleaning up, we found Clara's old Bible buried in debris, a divine find, its pages open to forgiveness verses. The Bible became our anchor, and I started leading prayers, my voice steady despite the ache. Grace confided her loneliness, her marriage crumbling after her husband's death. "I blame myself for not being enough," she whispered. I shared my vow, the fire, how God was healing me through acceptance. That night, a gentle breeze rustled the curtains as we talked, a soft sign from above. Days later, Mark called with news, his new job, easing the financial strain he'd hidden. "Like God lifted the weight," he said. I smiled, knowing the pattern. Each confession sparked divine favor. By summer, my hands steadied, the arthritis a distant memory, doctors puzzled, but I grateful. The group expanded, folks from neighboring towns joining, their tales of loss turning to hope. Mark and I rebuilt the cabin's memorial, and Grace helped, our friendship a slow bloom. One afternoon, a gust knocked over a tool, but it landed safe. God's reminder to embrace the winds of change.
Summer's warmth brought a new intensity to my journey, as if God stoked a fire within me. One afternoon, while sanding the memorial plaque, A spark from the grinder ignited a pile of shavings near the shop. I grabbed a bucket, dousing it, the smoke curling upward like a prayer. Mark rushed over, helping me clear the debris, and in the ashes we found a charred photo of Clara and the boys, undamaged, a divine preservation. "She's still with us," Mark said, tears in his eyes. I felt God's hand, turning a near disaster into a sign of redemption. The group gathered that night, the photo sparking stories of lost loved ones. Grace shared how her son smiled again, inspired by our talks. As we prayed, a sudden rain extinguished the last embers outside, a gentle cleansing. I confessed my self-forgiveness, the vow's weight lifting, and the room nodded, tears mingling with hope. Days later, a letter arrived. Grace's estranged sister reached out, crediting our group for her change of heart. "God's working through you," she wrote. I saw it, each step forward, fanned by divine flames. By fall, my hands moved with a carpenter's grace, arthritis gone, a miracle I attributed to God's healing. The group grew, a community of broken souls mending, and Mark suggested a documentary, my story to inspire others. That night, a soft wind carried a bird's song through my window as I carved, God's approval in the melody. The revolution spread, grief transformed into a quiet strength.
As winter crept back, marking 6 years since the fire, God's interventions wove a tapestry of peace around my broken vow. One snowy morning, I woke to a sunrise painting the mountains gold, a rainbow arcing through the storm, a divine promise like a whisper from Clara. The documentary took shape, my story filmed in the shop, the memorial plaque gleaming under soft light. It wasn't just my pain, it was our healing shared with the world. The group sent letters, folks across Montana finding hope. One writing, "Your forgiveness saved me from despair." God's light striking through nature and community turned my guilt to grace. Mark and I finished the cabin's restoration, Grace joining us, her laughter a gift. The film aired locally, drawing calls, grieving parents seeking solace. I prayed over each, and one night a gentle wind rustled my curtains as I carved, God's breath affirming my path. The arthritis stayed gone, doctors marveling, but I knew the source. At 72, I invite you into this revolution, self-forgiveness as sacred, a vow redeemed by divine hands. If this moves you, like, subscribe, share your story below. What brokenness can God heal in you? Until next time, walk in His light.